my sweet friends, I hope you are all doing well. Welcome back to my channel and happy Wednesday to everyone. In last week's video, I did create the cover for my October stories, and then I shared that we were moving that series on to Monday night, so it won't interfere with our regular tutorials. But if you're interested in seeing me create the layouts for that album, you can join me Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll do all of our stories on Monday night. For today, we're going to create this mini album. It's more of a flip book hybrid, and I'm using papers from my stash, and I always get to a point with some of my paper pads where it isn't my favorite patterns from the collection, or I have some cut aparts that were not my first impression to use, but we're going to use those today, and I'll show you some tips on how I overcome those challenges. But this has many flips, so you're going to have loads of room for your pictures and journaling, and I'm even including those special areas where your photos can be added and some journaling details as well. So we're going to create the cover first, and then we'll get to work finishing the inside. If that sounds good to you, then stick around and we'll make it together. I plan to work through some of the papers in my stash, has me reaching for these holiday paper pads, and as we all do, we pick these up and we go through all of our favorite patterns and cut aparts right away, and that leaves us with some that you would think your first impression would be something that wouldn't work for your projects. But I want to say that there are ways around some of these patterns, and so this is beautiful fall paper, has some foiling, has a slightly non-traditional color palette with the addition of that kind of sage green color. Now, one of the challenges I find with these overall patterns, I think they're meant to be for scrapbookers who make full 12 by 12 layouts. But for me, I'm always thinking in a smaller size for a card or a mini album. And so I need to get over seeing this whole page at the same time and think about it in the increments that I would actually be using. So for today, we have a book that is 5 by 6. So let's think about breaking this down into that size, and then what can we do with the portions that would not work well for that. And so we're going to get into that when we get further into the book, but we do have a plan for that. And then there are also some image cut aparts here that I would not necessarily consider usable for how I want to use them in my finished projects, but I think there are some alternative ways to use these so that we can actually take advantage of that pretty foiling or the pretty background and incorporate these into our layouts for a mini album. So we're going to work on that as well. First, we need to construct the book. And so my cover starts with a piece of 110 pound cardstock. It is 6 high by 10 3/4 wide. It's scored at 5 and 5 3/4. So we'll get our finished book size of 5 by 6 with a 3/4 of an inch spine. Now I want to start including some page flips so that we can really work in a lot of real estate. And so I'm going to switch now to 65 pound cardstock, and I have 2 pieces cut to be 6 high by 10 1/4 wide. It's scored at 5 and 5 1/4, and so this will be the first piece that goes in. Of course, I want to use my 2 glue combo, and this is going to be a flip outward, and so I'm going to just position this easiest to get this lined up along that score line, keeping it nice and even. So this page will flip out, and I'll just repeat that same process for this side, but this time I want to have the page going outward toward the right. So now our book will open, and then we have 2 more pages that flip outward. I want to continue on with those flips and add additional flips for the inside of this. So next I have my paper cut to be 6 high by 10 wide and scored at 5. And then I'm going to continue with my 2 glue combo. We have one created for the right side as well. So now our book will flip open. and it will flip again, and then it will flip one more time. And I always think it's so much fun to create these books with all of these page flips, and it is so much fun. However, it's not so much fun to photograph, but I'll do my best when it comes to my finished photos. So one more page here, and this one is going to be a top folding page. And so I have my paper cut to be 5 inches high by 12 inches wide and scored at 6. So that will be a full page flip, but top folding. So this one will go this way. We have another one created for this page as well. So that is that side done. And now let's flip our book open, and we'll have the first 2 pages, the next flip, the next flip. I don't know if that's even on screen. And then 2 that flip toward this way. So this is a perfect base, and you can do any kind of collection or any kind of theme with this. And then I will also be showing you some different ways to add some variations so you can see how versatile it is. So let's get on to finishing the inside of our book. Now, when we get to the inside, it will be nice that all of our page sizes and cardstock are the same measurement. So you'll be able to cut those very quickly. And so I have the cardstock 5 7/8 of an inch high by 4 7/8 of an inch wide. The pattern paper is 5 3/4 high by 4 3/4 wide, and that will work for all the inside pages as well as the front and back cover. Now this pattern here was actually cut from a larger sheet, and so this is one that I thought that would not really work for a card size project or a mini album, but just putting the sections separate from each other gives me an idea of how that pattern will fall. And so I really like this kind of gourd pattern on the top on wood grain. It will continue to work along with this, and then when we get to the end, I'll show you how I'm going to add those extra details. So I've just got this paired with a pretty chocolatey brown, and so I'll work through that. Now you can see how I'm just kind of following that pattern on the page, having the images on the top corners, and then we'll have this as our first sort of 2-page layout because they show together. So let's just flip that page and continue working along. Now you see we have 4 that show together, so I want these to coordinate as well. And that actually works out for me because I'm using a 12 by 12 paper pad. I can get 4 portions out of each page, and so that's a very frugal use of that pattern paper without causing a lot of offcuts. So I'm going to continue to work along and cover these pages. So now I've got that beautiful gourd pattern, which is perfect, I think, for fall, separate from Halloween because those gourds are not orange. And so this kind of extends the use of this book into fall. So these 2 pages in the middle are going to match. Then we get to those outside pages, and I've added an extra detail. And so this is one of the border strips from the page, and I am very guilty of not even looking at these pages in the paper pads, but I think if you break them down, you can actually get some extra added detail. And so I did that with that beautiful plaid with foiling, and then I cut that so that I could get use out of the wood grain with the gold foil as well. And so I want to kind of bookend those plaids by adding them to the outside edges. And there's one for this side. So moving on into that next flip, and I've just pulled out some of that beautiful kind of all over floral, and so I'm going to have one of these here, and then we'll use that border strip to add the additional detail on the outside. So I've got that pretty wood grain with the foiling. I'm just going to adhere that. You can imagine how nice and thick and sturdy this is getting as I continue to work along. So let's slide this all the way over, and we'll have that same pattern set for this side as well. I can just picture this for a Christmas album or for really any kind of theme or holiday. Probably one of the go-to bases I will keep in my stash. And then remember, we're putting that border strip along the outside. So now we have those flips finished. Bring it back to the center and flip these up. So now we're going to get into that page that I shared that had the all over 12 by 12 pattern with the words in the middle. And so I did go ahead and cut that into the portions that would work for my book. And you see, I have a little bit of that writing showing. And so I'll just add that here, and then I'll top that side with an additional layering pattern. And that's just the easiest way to kind of neutralize those words in the background. And I've got it cut for all 4 of these pieces. So I've got a little floral there and a little bit of a wood grain pattern all along with the houndstooth. And so I think that works really well. Okay, so let's go ahead and flip that as well. Look how thick this is getting now. It's so nice and sturdy. Okay, so here's where some of those cut aparts that I mentioned previously are going to work as layering elements with some additional die cuts. So I've got them cut out down to the gold foil because I really want to take advantage of that detail. And then there's also some lines here that'll be good for journaling. I do want to conceal that text on the top because I want to put 2 in, so I think it will be better if some of those words are hidden in the layers. So here is my first one. I'm putting this fairly close to the bottom, just leaving a little bit of a border from that pattern paper on the base. And we'll do the same thing for this side as well. Because this paper pad has 2 of the same sheet, I'm able to duplicate that detail for both pages. And I also cut out a pretty doily and layered that with more of that pattern paper. And I did remember to include that chocolatey brown border to keep the paper patterns separate. So now let's put that over the top here. And I'm just trying to keep those lines from that pattern going straight up and down. And I'll repeat that for this side as well. Now you can see that we have covered a little bit of that large pattern and kind of knocked it into the background, and so that works a little better. I've also cut some flowers from the offcuts from another project so I can get some use out of those. I layered them up, but I didn't shape them, and I've added a flat center. So these are not going to be bulky, and I did include 1 die cut of foliage so that I can kind of create a nice arrangement. And so I have 1 for each side, and my intention is that these will be kind of photo mats for special pictures, and then you can also add your journaling to the lined sections. So I think that really helps to work in that larger pattern along with some layering details, which will be nice when you finish the book. Let's go ahead and flip that open. Remember, we have a 4-page layout this time, but we added some detail to the outside. We can go ahead and focus on these 2 pages. I've got a similar plan for these 2 pages. I'm just going to utilize that cut apart, and I did trim that again where the foiling is. And I'm going to have 1 closer to the bottom this time and 1 closer to the top. Then I'll cover it with the die cut of the pattern paper. Just going to work in opposite corners as I work along. We've got some labels, and this was another part of that cut apart sheet, and it had a foil detail. So I cut them out along that foil. Then I trimmed them down so that they could overlap on the page. And I've added some adhesive only to one side, because if we're going to use this as a special picture mat, we might want to have some of the picture going underneath. So this is a good layering detail that we can add. And so I'm going to take advantage of that border that's already there. This one will go on this side. And I've got 2 more flowers, so I'll just go ahead and use those to cover up the rest of the words. Okay, so that makes another 2-page layout with all of those layering details. So let's go ahead and work on the cover now. Got some of that plaid to cover the back. I've added some pretty trim here from Really Reasonable Ribbon, and I just wrapped that around the back and then tacked it on the front so that it will stay in place. I'll add my pattern paper here to sandwich that in between. This is the only pattern that did not come from that paper pad, but I just really liked how warm it is, and that pattern added a little bit of faux texture, so I just incorporated that. Got a die cut doily here, just cut from a crisp white paper. I'm positioning this as far on to the bottom and over to the right as possible so that I'll have room for all of my finishing details, which is the sentiment that I have here. And I did cut that from one of the 4x4 cut aparts from a different collection, just utilizing what I have. And then I also added a border again of that chocolatey cardstock, and I popped that up on a spacer so we get a little dimension from that. And then I did create more of those flowers for the cover, but this time I shaped them and added the double head stamens so that I would have a lot of beautiful dimension. And I put more of that trim here as a bow on the back corner so that it will kind of balance and fill in that arrangement. There's die cut foliage, some netting, and loopy twine bows. I'll just add those here, being careful to not cover up the words on my sentiment. I have a couple of little charms to add here, just leaves going with the theme. Cut the excess. And then top those cut ends with a button. I brought down a couple of choices for sequin, and I initially thought that I would go with this one, but I think because we have that beautiful color of our flower that we can use these. So I'm just going to put these down in this corner to help balance that flower arrangement. And I'll just go ahead and tie this up with a pretty bow. And that's going to be it for our project today. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments and give me a big thumbs up for this tutorial. If you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe and join my crafty little family. Remember, there will be links for the ribbon in the description below, as well as for all our socials. And as always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye.